hosted by Andy Moss. Andy has been in the staffing industry for over 25 years, first as a recruiter, then eventually an account manager and business owner. This is the podcast where we sit down with fellow staffing owners to get the real stories of the successes, the failures, and the lessons learned along the way.
Welcome back to Staffing Stories. I'm your host, Andy Moss, and I'm excited to keep our conversation going about planning for 2024. And so I've invited one of my good friends, Keith Weightman from Bullhorn, to come help me discuss sales and development, training, the whole ecosystem. So welcome to the hot seat, Keith.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andy.
The backstory with Keith was the very first sales rep that sold Bullhorn to my staffing company eons ago. So that I started when you were a pup with Bullhorn, and now you're bigwigging it. But I appreciate you wanting to be on.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we could make it happen. Excited to be here. So
for those that don't know you, I know people in the Bullhorn community probably know who you are, but I really want to have you introduce yourself and just kind of where you came from.
Sure. So January will be 11 years at Bullhorn. So you're right. When I sold to you, I was just a baby AE at the time. I am now an RVP of national accounts with Bullhorn. So I've got a team of 13 and then about 150 accounts that my team oversees. And I've enjoyed the journey and I've seen Bullhorn grow from where it was, where I started, to where it is now. And it's been a really exciting and fun journey. And I've been super grateful to be able to land where I did.
It's amazing when you see a applicant tracking system, the product we bought years ago, what it is now, how it evolves, develops, and grows.
Yeah, no, it's been super exciting. And obviously as a salesperson, when the product evolves or we add new partner solutions or acquisitions, that's more for the salesperson to sell, to then go and help solve more problems for customers.
So again, sales is solving problems. That's a great point that you bring up. And I think sometimes as a sales individual, we forget that we are a solution. We're trying to create a solution to a problem.
Correct.
And if you can't solve ultimately the issue, they're not going to buy.
Exactly. So, I mean, at the end of the day, no one cares about your product. They do care about specific business problems that they have. And if you can help clear the way and help solve for them, that typically warrants a conversation.
So when you decided to get into with Bullhorn, did you come into it from the staffing background at all? I mean, how did you land with this job?
Yeah. So I'll go all the way back to college because it's an interesting story. So I graduated from East Carolina University with a degree in classical and jazz guitar performance. And I was teaching 7 days a week. And my parents were like, hey, you might, you got some of these student loans. You might want to, get another job still doing music. They were always super supportive. So I was like, so I took my resume, I put it on Monster, crossed my fingers. And then within a week, I got a call from Ronstad. At the time, they had a role where you were 1 week, you were a recruiter. The next week, you were a salesperson. You worked with a partner. So it was 1 week you're on sales, they're recruiting, and then you swap.
Yeah.
And it was, I ended up taking the role. I stayed there for about 3 years. When I left, I was a branch manager there. I learned a lot about staffing. I learned a lot about, working a real job. And then from there, I had a colleague that went to Ceridian, which is HR payroll software. So I got into the software world. I was there for about 3 years and I got recruited from Bullhorn. They're like, hey, we're expanding. We're hiring people in major metropolitan areas. And at the time I wasn't looking, but I was like, I know a lot more about staffing than I know about payroll and benefits. So I made the leap, and the rest is history.
Well, I did not know that little tidbit. So you still play the guitar quite a bit?
I do. I try and play every single day for anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, just to keep the chops per se. But I am nowhere near where I used to be when I was in college.
Well, there's not many of us that are still that way from college.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
join the club. Yeah. All right, so let's dive into. So I've had a series or two of just prep for 2024, and this is stacking up. This was a tough year for a lot of companies in sales. I think we all can agree we worked harder this year than we've ever done before, and 2024 is probably it's sizing up to be the same. When you hear that, what encouragements or ideas that you could pass to our listeners that are sitting there going, well, I've tried everything. What am I doing?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. One, you've got to be able to look back to understand what worked previously, what's no longer working. And then you need to really narrow in your focus on what is working and double down in those areas.
Yeah.
And for us, a lot of it is, how do we get the teams to focus on the fundamentals? Because right now, when things are hard or harder than they used to be, you've got to be masters of the fundamentals, like questioning, discovery, demo, outreach. How do we take those skills, those are things that we can control, and how do we refine those messages? Because we can't control what's going on in the economy, but we can control our own skill set. So we've here at Bullhorn really doubled down on skills enablement.
Yep.
And practice to build the strong foundation and base. Because if you can sell in a market like this, when things bounce back, like, you're unstoppable.
Well, and I think sometimes good times create weaker sales individuals. And there's that saying about weaker men, but I'm saying, like, great times, anybody can sell. But in tough times, you've got to really, the cream's going to rise to the top. So if you have to sit here and develop that talent from the individuals you have, what are things that you're honing in on? I mean, it's a numbers game, the way I always look at it, metrics and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty focused on, for me, I'm focused on pipeline build, client retention, and again, skills. We try to create a culture of skill development. And what I mean by that is, we've recently partnered with a company called Sales Assembly, that is a sales enablement company that serves all revenue functions from SDRs all the way up to CROs. And they have trainings every single week. And we want our reps to go at least once a month, right? Because we want to build that culture of, like, you need to continuously learn on your own. We're going to help you too, but we're also going to provide you the resources so you can go build that skill yourself. We also do a lot around deal reviews or call coaching to understand because sometimes you could have a lot of activity, but if your conversion metrics aren't there, then you need to take the next step to understand, well, is it the message that we're delivering or how we're delivering it? And having coaching specific to that as well, right? Because you can tell someone to go do something, but if they don't know the how, it doesn't land, right?
Well, and I think investing in sales training and development right now is a huge must. And even if it's on your own, there's a ton of free stuff out there. I mean, you just go on YouTube and there's tons of it. But it's also linking in with people in your industry that is really good, and just getting on the phone and talk like, hey, what's working for you, Keith? What's working for me? Because we're an industry where we share quite a bit. Unlike most industries where they keep it close to their chest. But one thing around sales is accountability. How do you at Bullhorn use accountability? I mean, that's always a tough one to start talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think in reality, as a salesperson, like, your metrics are pretty straightforward. Like, you've got a number. If you're not hitting your number, that's a pretty good understanding of, okay, where do we need to work backwards to understand what's standing in the way. Now, this year is different, right? Because it's harder to hit your number.
Yeah.
And than it was, I've been here for 11 years. This has been the hardest year since I've been here. And that's why I'm a big believer on doubling down on the things that we can control. And then, perfect example. So last couple of years, Bullhorn has created some bundles where we bundle a bunch of our products together. And when times are good, everybody spending money will go make that happen. Well, now that people are being much more conservative about how they spend their money, our reps were still trying to go out there and sell the whole thing. And they're like, well, we're losing all these deals. Why? So it's because we're trying to position too much versus isolating one specific problem and decoupling the bundles and going back to selling solutions to solve a problem that then open the door for future expansion in the account. So we've gone from let's go sell everything to let's decouple this and go solve the one problem that we know is a focus for this customer. And then we expand it later down the road.
Well, and I think that's identifying the problem or the pain. And when I sell, I try to quickly identify the pain from the buyer. I mean, they usually come out right and say it right. They're like, I'm only talking to you because I need this. But if you can't always bring them back around to solving the pain they're not going to buy and try to closing, because I know there's some sales reps that bring a lot to the table, but at the end of the day, you've got to close. So do you have a philosophy around closing that you've learned over the years or you're hitting pretty good with right now?
So my what's the word I'm looking for? Not definition of closing closing is not, to me, it's not a thing. It's a series of things that have been done and executed very well over the course of a process. Like, I don't think you get to a point and you're like, all right, put on my closing hat, I'm going to get on a call and we're going to negotiate this thing, right? It's more of like, have you done the steps around proper discovery? Have you identified a pain? Have you built a champion? Is the pain something that is actually blocking executive level priority? Because if it's not, then it's just a nuisance, right? We have a bunch of pains here at Bullhorn. I'm sure you have a ton of pains at 3DIQ, but are they pains that are so unbearable that you have to go either spend the money to solve it, or it's part of your strategic direction of how you go, and right now you have that pain is blocking it. So how do you move that out of the way? Because a lot of times people will be like, oh, I talked to the customer, they've got this pain, but if the executives don't care about it because they have another priority or another direction, it doesn't matter. So you end up wasting cycle time thinking you have a problem, but the problem's really an annoyance. It's not blocking something the executives care about.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you're kind of bringing it all together. When you do a lot of hiring, and I know when you hire a sales rep, what are characteristics that you look for in your younger talent coming up through the ranks?
Yeah. For me, the best skill that I look for is someone that takes action. And what I mean by that is if they go learn something, they immediately put it into action. So it's that speed to implementation of, and you'll see it when you go on a training or you'll teach someone something. Some people will be like, that's a really great idea, but they'll never do anything with it. Then you have the other reps will be like, that's a really great idea. And they'll come back and they'll show you how they did it and made it better. Those are the reps that I see time and time again overachieve their number. They get promoted because they don't wait for things to happen. They go take messy action. They learn along the way, and they get better because they iterate over time. They're not afraid to make mistakes.
That's a big thing. Don't be afraid to fail. And sales is a failure industry. We go to baseball, like, okay, bat 300. That's 3 of 10. And that's a Hall of Famer. So, and I think that's sometimes with the younger generation, learning to fail, fail quickly, learn from it, and adapt and grow. But that competitive nature to pick yourself off the mat is something that's hard to identify from a hiring standpoint. Any helpful hints there? Because I know there's a lot of people listening that are maybe, I made that mistake. I mean, that he or she sounded great.
Oh yeah, I've made that mistake multiple times. I don't think there's any silver bullet. I mean, you can look at past experiences of where they've been. You can look at past experience if they're newer. Did they compete in sports? Were they in extracurricular activities? Some of those things you can try and spot just based on past, but there's no silver bullet
until you get in the seat. You got to put them in the seat.
Exactly. And right now, for hiring new people at Bullhorn, it's harder than ever because of the fact, like when I started, we sold ATS CRM and maybe like Bullhorn Reach or something like that. So you learn 2 products. Now when a rep comes in, it's like, okay, you've got like 18 different products that you need to learn and understand the problems that those products solve. So it's much more complex now than it was, 10 years ago.
Well, then, like for us at 3DIQ, we're a marketplace partner. We're one of 100 that are probably in that, which, having a marketplace for Bullhorn is amazing. It's actually, there's not many ATSs that have marketplace features that are at Bullhorn, but it's also you're one in there. How do you, that's always been our struggle. Like, how do we show our wares to get the attention?
Yeah. And that's like the challenge of every marketplace partner, because you've got the reps that have their own products and their own quota. Then you've got 100 plus marketplace partners that also want to get the relationship with the rep so they can get in front of the customer. So it's where I've seen the most success is when there's peering between the marketplace partner and the account rep, and there's reciprocity in lead sharing or customer intel based on, you guys are all working on all of the same accounts in many cases.
Yeah. And
there are probably things that that my team doesn't know and vice versa. So it's all about that information sharing between the two.
But it is identifying challenges. Sometimes they don't know, our customers don't realize the I guess you'd say the pain that we're trying to solve. It may not be at the top of their list, but of course we want to move it to the top of their list.
Yeah.
But when you look at 2024, it's going to be a tough year, and you're going to have to double, triple your numbers. How do you lay out expectations to someone? I talk to my young sales reps all the time. I was like, look, if you're expecting to do this today, you have to mentally say, how am I going to double that, triple that? And it's hard for somebody to think big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For us, it's about trying to lay out a path. They need to feel like there's a path to get to their number one. And then 2, is there a path for them to over exceed? So some of the things that we go about doing is, okay, we take what their average deal value is, what their average sales cycle timeline is, what their average close rate is, to help them formulaically lay out a plan to say, okay, you need this many deals to be able to get to your number. And then, a new thing that we're trying to do this year is actually help them break down the amount of what we call white space in account. So maybe account only has one product.
Yep. Well,
if you were to do X, Y, and Z, there's X amount within this account that also can attribute you getting to your number, so that way they can look at their territory and say, okay, I need 15 deals at, whatever the value, 70K, my average close rate is X. And in my account, I've got more than enough that if my closing rate is only 30%, that I can not only get to my number, but I also can exceed it.
Well, planning is the big thing. And that's what we do right now, this time of year, that the stuff you're talking about is the things you need to be doing now. That you can't do that in January or February. So if you're not already in discussions with your team about laying out goals for next year, you're probably a step behind. Quickly move that up. But I love the thought about planning and making sure you know what you have to do when you jump into the ball game.
Yeah, we're in the process of that right now. So every year we do territory realignments, and last year we introduced a healthcare specific vertical that's been really, really beneficial, because again, as we start to grow in all these different products, well, we're not going to stop selling the product. So how do we simplify and narrow the focus for the reps is, okay, let's go very deep into one specific vertical and have a team that is only focused on that. So then when products come out that don't serve that industry, it's not a distraction to them because they're focused there. So we're looking at replicating that in other places as well to really go and be specialists in specific verticals.
Well, you've given us a lot of great nuggets today, Keith, and I really appreciate you being willing to sit down with me and just talk about it, because I know you're really good at what you do. Bullhorn's a great product. We're glad to be in the ecosystem with that, but just thank you for sharing. And always end like, okay, if you're streaming something right now, what's your Netflix or your Prime? What's the go-to?
Oh, I'm not a big TV watcher. So here's one that we are watching. The Gilded Age. It's on HBO.
Okay.
And the reason being, I would never watch this, but my wife and I went to Newport, Rhode Island in September. And there's like all these mansions. We went on these mansion tours and we listened to like the history around it, which was really cool. And then we found out that this series was actually filmed in these mansions. So then we got super interested in it and started watching the series, and it makes it a little bit more interesting. So that's what we had been watching lately.
All right. Well, it sounds like you got a show that both you and the wife like. I battle that here. It's either I like my show or she likes her shows.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are and few between, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I can't take The Bachelor, so I just refuse to put a foot down. All right.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for being on the hot seat with me. And again, thank you. And I know my listeners appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the episode. Staffing Stories is brought to you by 3D-IQ. We are the future of staffing sales. Our solutions are designed to supercharge your sales and 3x placements, all without ever leaving Bullhorn. Direct market, deliver talent, and drive sales with our all-in-one tool designed for the modern recruiter. Visit 3diq.com/stories to learn more. Find Staffing Stories on LinkedIn, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.